What?
Well,
Oh, that's right, baby. You had your smooth jazz last week, but this week you're getting the Bash Brothers of podcasting back in action. The two Austins back to carry the load that we weren't here to carry last week. And Tiny, do you know how we carry our loads? In buckets!
I missed you guys.
Oh, God. They're back.
Oh, no. Hey, everybody. I'm Dane Holland.
I'm Austin Shazam Pfeiffer.
I'm Marcus. I am Electric Man.
And I'm Austin Tiny Zent.
And this is Nerd It Through the Grapevine, the podcast where four best friends gather weekly to talk about our favorite parts of past, present, and future nerd culture. And the four of us are back, baby. After last week of only being at 50% power, we are at 110% power because Tiny's flexing without even knowing it right now.
I am flexing.
It's too much power. And for 114 episodes, we've had a certain format, and we're going to mix it up a little bit today, streamline things a little bit more, and just go with the flow, baby. I just want to, like the smooth jazz we had last week, as Austin described to us with me and Marcus. It felt good. It felt nice, and we want to see where our great brains go with it. So buckle up, strap in. Get ready for the ride.
Yeah, it's almost like a peek behind the scenes because it's the way we just talk to each other.
It is. It really is.
So I've noticed a problem. I call it the dichotomy of Drizzt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to preface everything that I say following this with I love Drizzt. Drizzt is a fantastic character. He's very iconic to the genre of fantasy, and he has inspired things just all throughout. He's almost become a trope himself. He sprang from D&D, and so the universe that he lives in helped bring about what D&D is today. And as you go through it, it's kind of hard to describe. But for people that don't know who Drizzt is he's a drow or a dark elf. He lived in the Underdark. The society that he came from is
unpronounceable.
It's a matriarchal society. So for the layman, it's a society ruled by women, and it's a very cruel lifestyle. It's very classist and hierarchical. And yes,
How do you say that? How do you say it?
say what?
Where he lives. Yeah,
Mesobaranzan.
that's awful.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's terrible.
That definitely comes with like one of those warnings that says, caution, if you use Metzabarazan, you might experience involuntary diarrhea.
I've always experienced that anyway. I've always mispronounced his name even because Drizzt, the way it's spelled is what, Drizzt, but there's an apostrophe somewhere?
The apostrophe is in his surname of Doerden.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah, it's Drizzt Doerden.
I've always pronounced it as Drizzt, and I may not be the only one because surely I got that from somewhere.
I did at first myself,
okay, but
so
it is
you're not the only one.
Drizzt.
It's Drizzt Doerden.
Got it.
Now, the house that he came from was not a high-ranking house, and wars are encouraged, but you have to pretty much decimate the house that you attack in order to ascend in rank. And that even goes as far as family, because the men are second-class citizens. There's usually a limited amount of males. Drizzt started off as the third boy. He was going to be sacrificed to the Spider Queen, the goddess of the drow, Lolth.
I know who this is.
Exactly.
She was on a magic card.
And when that was about to happen, the second male child, slew the first, so now he's the elder boy. So now Drizzt gets to live, and he's the second boy of House Doerden. And then there's other conflicts that ensue, and they rise up through the ranks. They never become the top house, but they're in the top 5, and it's really not that important. It's just a backdrop to show you of how drow society is. Well, Drizzt himself doesn't hold the same values of his people, because it's all violence and viciousness and it's all about me. And he doesn't feel that way. And he also physically has some characteristics that are uncommon. He has lavender eyes instead of red. He can still see in the infraspectrum just like the rest of his kin, but he sees people as people and he values life. So he's very uncommon. And he grows up living through this, and eventually separates himself from everything he's known. He survives in the Underdark by himself, which is a feat in and of itself. One of the first people he befriends is a Smurf Neblin. Yeah,
What?
These names,
Smurf Neblin?
Yeah, it's a deep gnome or a dark gnome.
What?
Yeah.
Hold on, Smurf is the category of what?
There's a V in the beginning of it, but it's pronounced Smurf Neblin.
There's a V at the beginning of Smurf?
Of Smurf Neblin. Like the F is actually a V.
Smurf Neblin.
Yeah. Yeah.
They Lord.
Yeah, it's wild, dude.
Love it. Oh, I love it.
The one he befriends is Belwar Disengulp, which, when he was a young man on a raid, the party of Smurf Neblin was attacked, and he managed to convince his drow brethren to let him go, but Belmar ended up having his hands chopped off.
Boo.
But he got to live. That was kind of the caveat. So he was sent back to the other Smurf Neblin as a sign of, hey, don't go to this area because there's drow.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't they sound more like, hey, don't go back to this area, there's more drow?
Actually, the gnomes are fairly large, the Smurf Neblin, or the deep gnomes.
I need to see pictures of the gnomes, because in my head, gnomes like David the Gnome. You know, it's I don't know if you remember him, but yeah.
So all these things happen. He befriends these different peoples and groups that just hate each other. The Smurf Neblin is the biggest, I wouldn't say threat to the drow, but they're the closest associated enemy of the drow.
So within drow culture, it's unheard of to befriend other races.
Like, you just
anybody.
Do not you don't even befriend your own race.
Okay,
because it's all about you and what you can do and how much you can mess up everybody around you.
So are dark elves being depicted this way in games because of how hard D&D pushed that as their backstory?
Well, D&D has inherent racism in it. Mm-hmm. Because there's different races, and as people, racism exists, so it is in this game. But it's mainly due to the actions and the lore of the different races, which has developed over many different things. Gary Gygax didn't sit down and go, all right, drows are going to be this way and they're going to be hated. It's just what happened over time. And so Drizzt eventually leaves the society, moves up to the surface world, and incorporates himself and becomes a well-known hero. So that is a very brief synopsis of Drizzt. There's 37 books. That's as condensed as I can make.
You boiled it down into like 6 minutes. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good.
But as he levels up, does he like become just like a pillar of badassery as he gets leveled
he
up?
Starts off that way. In a sense, if you're a big D&D nerd like I am, you can see Dungeons and Dragons influencing how he works, because the first books were written around version 3.5. And so as I'm watching Drizzt go through his day-to-day and his life, I can pick out what classes he is. He's multi-classed. People want to say he's a ranger. That is where he's heavily statted, but he's not just a ranger. He starts off as a champion fighter. Then he moves into more of a rogue, and then becomes kind of a ranger, later on in his life. So he's multi-class, he's multifaceted. He doesn't use any ranger spells. He only uses spells inherent to the drow. So he uses bits and pieces of different things. So I'm not really sure what subclass of ranger he is. I'm leaning towards Beastmaster, based on the things that I've come across that he's done, because he does have a companion Guinevere, who is a panther.
Ooh.
And she's really cool. She's a magical one. There's a little stone idol that summons her from another plane. She's a super cool character in and of herself. She's not just a mindless creature. So all of that to say, here's the problem with Drizzt. He's become a trope. Everybody wants to remake Drizzt. Everybody wants to take this thing that is horrible and hated and nobody likes except for this one guy, and they want to push him out and make him this beacon for change and to be this great, almost monolithic thing, which it worked for Drizzt, which is awesome. But not everybody can be Drizzt. You can use things about Drizzt to inspire your character. That's great, but don't just reskin him. And I see a lot of people just reskinning Drizzt.
You mean to like actually just play D&D?
To play D&D in other forms of media. I'm seeing it more and more the deeper I get into the series of.
What is it you're seeing, you think? Like what would you classify that archetype as?
A very broken background, something evil, and trying to make something evil good. So like taking a bad guy, making him a good guy.
So like the anti-hero.
He feels different. No, I wouldn't necessarily say anti-hero. It's just he feels different than everybody else. He's not just like his kin.
I mean, it's a trope that's been around for ever since storytelling, right? I mean, of the like breaking away from your culture to do your own thing. And I think with the Drizzt character, like he's become, from what you've described, he's kind of like a Swiss Army knife of a character because he does all these like multi-classing kind of thing. And the longer his journey is, the more he's going to, I don't know, like learn, I guess. And the more he's going to change and the more he's going to do like a bunch of different things. But to become like almost like an unstoppable hero of having that background of like, if he would have stayed with his people, he would have never become what he is now. So like him leaving his people, learning these different ways, these different types of cultures, he's become way more than he could have ever been.
I mean, that's true.
He was, yeah.
It's true. But I've seen people just, it's Drizzt with a different name.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm saying a lot of. It's just a different name, Drizzt.
I don't know about like direct inspiration or ripoff or anything from the Drizzt character, but from the way that you've described him and how many different skills he's picked up along the way and how much he levels up along the way and how he becomes this pillar of just unbreakable like status. I mean, he reminds me of just like Goku off of Dragon Ball Z, and that's like that would be like my Japanese animation take on that same style of character. He comes from another planet that was a war planet. They were all the same race of people that hated everybody else, and they were just out to destroy everything. But they got destroyed and sent him off. And then he is supposed to actually go to this planet and destroy this planet. But it turns out he's met with love and compassion, and he, of course, starts his journey and continues on from there. But people die along the way. He loses things along the way. And throughout, his journey, he's getting stronger and getting different skills. And, he becomes a cliche. Himself, because Goku's transformations. Now I'm Super Saiyan 1. This is Super Saiyan 2. This is Super Saiyan 3. It becomes repetitive, and then people kind of take that upgrade mechanism and that idea that happened originally there, and they have almost, you feel like they bastardize things in a way to where you see so much of your character in them, but they just don't do well with it.
Right. What I've done just in playing Dungeons and Dragons, you build a character to play. I've taken elements from different characters and mesh things together, so we've all taken inspiration from other places. That's human nature. There's no true original idea anymore. We just make different versions and different combinations of the same things that already exist, which is great, and there's nothing wrong with that.
That's the point of art. Yeah.
I'm just saying, let's be a little more varied.
Yeah.
Right.
That's my whole point.
Some connections that I make, because you said he kind of becomes a trope, and in my head, this character from Malazan Book of the Fallen, Anomander Rake, fits that so well because he's like a dark elf. And Erickson in the 80s, when he was writing it, basically Anomander Rake is his first D&D character from the 80s. So it very well could have been inspired by Drizzt, or it could not. not sure, but he kind of in that world becomes. How did you put it with Goku? He becomes a cliche in itself.
Yep.
Because by the time we get to see him, because he was, like I said, he was Ericsson's first D&D character, which he later took out of D&D because of the kinds of limitations that you were talking about earlier. He kind of noticed all the kind of inherent biases and stuff within the character classes and the racial like stats and stuff. And so he takes it to GURPS, like a generic role-playing system. But I guess what I'm trying to say is he, like many others, and especially fantasy authors at that time, are taking that archetype and kind of using it in their games, using it to tell stories between their friends and stuff. But in Malazan, we don't get that. We don't get like that origin story. By the time we see Anomander Rake, he's already been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of millennia, and he's like this ascended godlike character. And he actually would be a god, and people do worship him, but he just kind of swears it off because that automatically creates this like symbiotic relationship between god and follower in this magic system. But yeah, I don't know. Like you said, I feel like maybe I'm wrong though, because as you describe him, I see less similarities. But definitely with characters like Elric of Melniboné, Michael Moorcock's famous characters, that's like more of a sword and sorcery kind of writing. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Okay, sorry.
You mean the author or
yeah? It was just these kind of
fantasy?
iconic characters in fantasy, which like D&D is heavily inspirational in like in the sword and sorcery genre and high fantasy genre, and characters like Drizzt.
I've probably read sword and sorcery type and just didn't know that it was a type.
Yeah,
because I read all different kinds of fantasy. I don't have one specific.
Yeah, well,
thing.
like the old Conan the Barbarian stuff would count as sword and sorcery.
Gotcha. I mean,
and stuff like that.
My fantasy reading has mostly been like Dragonlance type things. So before I knew D&D, I loved D&D because that's based on D&D, like a lot of the Drizzt books.
Right.
So
well, and that's what's funny is so is Malazan kind of. I mean, it definitely doesn't feel like it at this point, the point where he actually decides to write novels, which is years and years after the games. So it's not like he's like writing down his campaigns. He's just using those characters in that world to tell a new story.
Oh, absolutely.
And by this time, his very first D&D character is this god, right? And he's already dated all the goddesses and the pantheon and all this stuff. So I just think it's a really cool idea how these authors are taking their, because I mean, Brandon Sanderson's another big author who's got his very first D&D character in his new novels. So it's just a really cool thing to see it all come kind of full circle.
And it's almost like with what Tolkien did for fantasy. He was like this pillar of fantasy that all fantasy beyond it has some kind of pull from what he made. Then there's this almost renaissance whenever D&D comes out, that all these future authors are growing up playing these games and making these stories and DMing. And then in the future, they're writing novels. And D&D is the reason that they can write what they do because their characters, they've drawn them from this game that they play.
And the fleshed out worlds and stuff too.
Yeah.
Because they're drawn from like years of gaming, which just make that your timeline, like make that your prehistory.
I mean, D&D itself is writing a story with friends.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm working on a book and I'm taking one of my D&D characters because, well, guess what? He's already got a story that started. Yeah. It's a great place to begin because it's already been written. I'm just documenting it. And obviously, you got to make some changes to make it work as a story, as a narrative, as opposed to staying with, the silly, goofy things that happen at a table because there's always these weird things that happen that's just goofy.
But when writing a character, when creating characters, when you're writing anything, getting to know the character as the author is insanely important because those characters are going to make decisions in the books. And readers are going to be able to see, like, that character wouldn't do that because they're learning who the character is by what you're writing. Like, everything you've given them is who that character is. And as an author, something like having a character in D&D that you've fleshed out, the decisions this character would make.
Absolutely.
Because you've played the character. Like, you've been them in scenarios.
You've been that character for countless hours.
So the use of them in a novel is perfect. Like it's a match made in heaven because they already have a personality and a background that you can make decisions for them as you write the book without having to figure out how they would handle the situation as you go, because you already know how they would.
Exactly.
So it's not out of character. Things don't happen that you go, wait, why did this happen? Like things like would happen, like let's say Rings of Power with Galadriel. You know, that character has never been written before. No one knows how they're supposed to act. So you get this show and then, you know, they do these things that you're, you know, that was sarcasm because that is a character that we already do know how they're supposed to be.
Right.
It's just not them at all.
But yeah, now that you mentioned Tolkien, I think there actually is an example of a kind of a rogue dark elf in his legendarium too. It's just not very fleshed out. So, I mean, you could even look back to him as
Who was it?
Progenitor of this trope. I forgot.
You
But
don't know the name?
I don't know the name.
Do you even like
Marcus.
Tolkien?
I thought you had like
It's
a
one of those
doctorate in
random
Tolkien.
things. It's one of those random things.
I'm not mad, but I am disappointed.
It's okay. I'll look it up here in just a minute. But point being said is because like Tolkien was like huge, which leads to a fan base for D&D. You know what I'm saying? Like these things kind of correlate with each other a lot, and like we see D&D rise in popularity, then we get like, you know, because D&D has orcs, elves. It's like it's basically just Middle Earth. It's just to avoid copyright.
It has all the races and then some.
Right, and then they
You
add
know?
to it. Right, they take what he had and then added to it. And of course, people are going to gravitate to it if, you know, they're book nerds in this time and they want to explore that. And then we get Drizzt.
Well, it's not even just book nerds and stuff anymore. I mean, it's just regular people,
Right.
wanting to like. And I say that with it breaks my brain because it's just
they play it at high school. They play it at high schools now.
Like you talk about this openly with people like football players and everybody are gathering around like talking about Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, and it makes me slightly angry and upset as this inner
Me too, because I don't even have time to play. How do you got time to play when I don't even have time to play?
It's not the time. It's accepted.
Like this inner child inside of me is screaming for attention because it's just like the way we were looked at back when we were that age and we would decide to talk about some Dungeons and Dragons is people would have a filter that go on while they walk past this conversation, and we could be talking just like this, but they would automatically just kind of change it inside of their head to make sure it sounds like your stereotypical nerd. Oh, you're just a nerd over there talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
But now,
you
like,
with your sword.
It's like hip now.
yeah. Well, Game of Thrones, I mean, like House of the Dragon right now, it's back to being what it was whenever Game of Thrones was popular on TV. Mm-hmm. People are talking about it again. And it's people that wouldn't even consider themselves nerds.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just blowing.
My connection went out. I'm sorry.
So you just randomly blow in the middle of talking.
blowing right into
like,
it.
this will in no way disrupt what's happening.
I didn't expect the.
Just it's back to being what it was, like on TV again, because it's back on TV and people are talking about it again, and people that would never call themselves nerds, they would never say like, yeah, I'm a nerd. Like you have to convince them. It's like, no, you are. Like you just don't know it yet. But it's things like Game of Thrones and things like D&D and all this stuff that, yeah, now it's the perfect time to be that nerdy kid growing up because all the stuff you like, it's being talked about more. And there was somebody, I forget which NBA player it was, but I just saw a quote today from some NBA player saying that like 80% of the NBA loves anime, but they won't admit it.
Good.
He's like, there are so many players that they come across that love anime, but they're like, they're not going to say that because they're not the big macho, you know, like big macho guys.
Yeah, no,
It's
there's like D&D and anime clubs in high schools now.
oh yeah.
It's so crazy.
That makes me want to throw up out of anger.
We were born in the wrong time,
it
guys.
makes me want to flip tables because even now, as a grown 34-year-old bald man, there's still a hint of shame when I admit that I'm a nerd, even though I know there's no shame in it.
Right.
It's like, yeah,
Just conditioned.
yeah, it's like, hey, I got a podcast. It's really cool. You should listen to it. And they're like, oh, what's it about? Well,
Nerd stuff.
it's four guys talking about nerd stuff. Oh, so you're a nerd? I wouldn't have thought you was a nerd. Yeah, I'm a nerd.
You have no idea.
You don't look
Yeah.
like a nerd.
Exactly. You don't look like a nerd. You look like a metalhead. Thank you for describing my decorations. Awesome.
And the idea of like all these characters inspired by things beforehand, like of course it's going to happen in fiction. Like as writing characters goes, yes, everything's going to be like inspired by something before it. It's art in general. Everything is inspired by something made before. It's what's so important about art. And we, like, as personalities, as people, some of these characters, like our personalities are also inspired by some of the things that we read and stuff and the things we gravitate towards growing up. Even like I love Superman so much. Growing up, favorite hero, my dad's favorite superhero. I just in love with the character of Superman. And it gave me like a sense of, like wanting to protect those around me that need it. Like when things bad happen around me, I've got this innate sense of there's something I need to do to stop this. I've got to help this moment, even though I'm a, weak little human, not even close to Kryptonian. But it's just, it inspired a part of my brain that I don't think would even be there if not for the consumption of this character that I had growing up. And even beyond things like fantasy and comics, which is something I think within our podcast, we've got a very almost like a 2 for fantasy, 2 for two for comics almost. It's like half and half.
I'm crossing over. Okay?
You are. You're getting there.
So
we'll get Marcus over there too.
I'm crossed over.
We're
talking about.
Yeah, we're all crossing over with each other.
One for anime.
He literally gave all of us comic books on Christmas.
He did.
Yeah,
Because he didn't want them.
X-Men. I'm an X-Men.
I'm saying specialties.
Okay, specialties.
Yeah, okay.
One for anime.
But
I'm the Lonely Island.
The lonely man. But in things like Superman and comic books, like Superman is kind of the original that all the other ones have been inspired at some way. But even Superman was inspired by John Carter of Mars and Samson.
But it's also it got even the characterization of Superman himself, like that bulletproof skin. It was taken from one of their fathers being gunned down in real life by a robber. So they wanted to create that father-like figure that cared so much about taking care of everything, that also embodied these ideas of what they took from John Carter from Mars and what they took from the biblical figure Samson and other ones like that as well. And they wanted to see he wanted to see like his father not be shot. Basically, was the idea.
So they created the character for it, and then now look, like it's history now. Like everything beyond it has spawned from it.
Yeah, my favorite hero would not exist without that creation, because Shazam, the originally named Captain Marvel, took inspiration from that Superman style character, but with a mythological twist to it. And it also took and played upon the background of one of the writers that actually had kind of grown up a really crappy childhood and everything, and kind of wanted to imagine if everything was just as simple as saying a magic word. Could I be grown up? Because they wanted to think about this kid transforming from a kid to a full-grown adult and not have to deal with all the traumas of their childhood. And they even fashioned it after one of the Hollywood stars of the day, the way Captain Marvel looked and everything else. So it was very heartfelt. But then they're like, you know what? That'd be a good superhero. What would they say? What would this matter? And then they created the Shazam character based off of literally inspired by the strengths of the old mythological times of the Greek and Roman times.
And I mean, superheroes are just another way of like having these D&D characters. I mean, like as you write your D&D character, your personality is going to be in it. Like the character is going to be inspired by like something that you are.
Thanks for taking my talking point that I was sitting here on.
Dang, sorry.
But I mean, that just means we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah,
I mean,
perfect.
I was going to say that every character you play, you accentuate something about yourself and put it into that character. So all of your characters are an extension of you and an exaggeration of one aspect. Like Shazam with, the poor childhood and wishing for the magic word to fix everything. That's a part of him that he's made into this.
That's like me whenever I make any D&D character, I have a hard time straying away from the backstory of just there's undeniable greatness somewhere deep within them, and they've got this destiny that they have to fulfill. You know, I can't stray away from that. That's my personal pick, but it just so happens this guy's got scales on his skin. Whatever.
And then he like spikes a ball of fire on a man's head and decimates everyone.
It's one time.
But like, how often do these characters that fans of things make? I mean, even the creators of Superman were fans of John Carter of Mars and things like that. And with D&D, like especially with D&D, like how many people play that game and make characters? How many of them turn out to be this epic like face of a thing that already existed before a fan basically made it? Because Anomander with Malazan is a known face of that series. Like,
yeah, he's like the resident badass.
Yeah.
Like I said, like he's more of a fixture of the world that you sometimes get some characterization for.
Yeah.
But yeah, like in the way you put it, Austin, he's almost a cliche. Like he's ascended the mortal plane. Like he is more God than he is man, but he still has physical form. And the midnight skin because he's a child of darkness. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just saying he's like the epitome of badass, kind of like Drizzt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Drizzt is the face, a large face of D&D. Like this started off with a campaign just with people who liked Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And now they've written, what'd you say, 38 books?
He's working on number 38 now.
this is
because
Salvatore,
Drizzt,
right?
Yeah, because Drizzt is still ongoing.
Yeah.
And funny enough, kind of springboarding off of your topic, your conversation from last week, he was never intended to be a main character.
Really?
He was a side character that everyone loves so much that he usurped the role.
Yeah.
So the second trilogy written is the prequel trilogy about his childhood.
Oh, cool.
So
Nice.
then he builds up to, where he's at now currently, which is almost godhood.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And with Drizzt, like the Forgotten Realms, is that what their
Yes.
whole thing is called?
Yes.
Like in the game of Magic.
That's the world.
Okay, gotcha. In the game of Magic the Gathering, that's a Wizards of the Coast owns that card game. Wizards of the Coast also owns Dungeons and Dragons. The first set of D&D or the first set of Magic that included D&D within it is the Forgotten Realms. And
Yep.
that's crazy to me that it's fan-made. Like, it's a fan-made thing. Like, they didn't work for D&D. They didn't work for Gygax.
No.
They didn't make these things officially for them. But they became something so much, and they became such inspiring characters and everything that the first set of Magic cards that had D&D in it is from this fan-made thing
Yeah.
of this badass Drizzt and his homies. Like, because these
Exactly.
names that you've said, I know these names. I know Lolth because I have a Planeswalker like Magic card of the character Lolth, and I knew the Panther or whatever that Drizzt has.
Yeah.
That's because of that card game, and it's just amazing to me to see basically fan fiction become something so mainstream
And iconic.
and well known that, like, how do you do that? How do you come up with a character
It's
that
kind of
important?
mind-boggling,
It is.
really, because I mean, he was Drizzt himself was just a throwaway notion because originally he was supposed to be somebody else, and one of the main editors calls up Mr. Salvatore and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to this meeting. Your book is great, but you're going to have to ditch this one character and stick in a different one." And he's like, what do you mean? He goes, "For whatever reason, this character is a no-go. So I need an answer now of who you're going to put in there." He's like, can I get a few minutes to think about it? No, I'm literally about to walk into this meeting. I'm looking at the door. And he goes, Dark Elf Drizzt Doerden. I mean, essentially, that's how he came to be.
That's incredible.
Just he pulled it out of his butt, and now he's this giant, monolith of fantasy.
Yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah.
I love knowing that. Yeah, the little stuff like that. Like, if that conversation would have never happened, there is no Drizzt. There may be no Anomander, like from Malazan.
Right, like I said, I can't draw a direct connection and never
Right.
heard that that's actually the case, but the timeline fits so well
Yeah.
Yeah.
that it could be that Anomander predates Drizzt, but it could be, but he doesn't in like the public knowledge. Well,
right.
plus, he's way more popular than
and
Anomander.
as popular as Drizzt is, I'm sure that in many ways he has helped steer the lore for Dungeons and Dragons as we know it today, for how the drow function themselves. Because if you look in several of the books when it mentions drow, you can see little excerpts from R.A. Salvatore in there to help describe the drow, because each race has a little description telling you kind of how they are and a little bit about their society to give you an idea of how to play a character of that race. And R.A. Salvatore helped write that for the drow.
We've talked a lot about like heroes that have been inspired kind of by the predecessors, or at least characters that seem inspired by them. You can draw some comparisons to them. And I know Austin and I mentioned like Shazam wouldn't exist without Superman because he was inspired, by him. But villains is also something that come to mind too, because it seems like the villains are always written after the fact, after the hero's been made, because the hero needs something to come across. I mean, there are a lot of stories, where the villain is the focus, and then they're like, well, we need something to go against that. We need something to combat this larger bad idea. But with the heroes coming first, a lot of times the villains are inspired by them. So there's a lot of times it's just the antithesis of them. Like without the hero, the villain wouldn't be the way they are. Like with Shazam, upcoming is the Black Adam movie. Like Black Adam's about to be a household name.
It is. It's going to either soar or crash. There's no glide.
No.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's no glide for this movie. It's soar or crash. And as heavy as The Rock is hammering social media with this stuff, I love my characters, okay? I don't want to ever be considered a fair weather fan. So I'm giving it the biggest benefit of the doubt. Going to go see it in IMAX 40X, where the seats move and all that other stuff.
You can smell The Rock's head.
I can smell what he's cooking when he fires that lightning bolt. The most electrifying man in DCEU. Oh, that felt good. But it was,
My name's Billy.
It doesn't matter. Shazam!
Oh, if that happens. Oh, it needs to happen.
Oh, please.
Because his name is actually Billy Batson.
Yes, it is.
It just hit me that his name was actually Billy.
So, but with Black Adam being so heavily pounded upon by Dwayne Johnson, I guess. I just want to say The Rock. He's The Rock. So... So it's just The Rock wants Black Adam to happen. It's a passion project of his. He's been working into getting into this Black Adam role and to making it what role he wants it to be for a long time. And I want it to succeed, but I'm also really stupid jealous that he's doing all of this, combining all of this element of Black Adam into this big anti-hero role without him ever stepping foot into the role he was originally intended for, which was the antithesis to Captain Marvel, aka Shazam. Black Adam wasn't even supposed to be a long-run character. Black Adam was an issue character that was to be defeated, and then they kept bringing him back and kept bringing him back. Later iterations came out to where they then took Black Adam into a different role where he started off as that still, but then developed slowly more into this anti-hero aspect that The Rock is just jumping head first into. He's, and it's even confirmed, and I can't get on the fucking internet, but Henry Cavill's in it. And it's I want it to succeed. I think it's going to be fun. But I don't know what's going to happen. But I would like to see the proper credit due, because without Shazam, there would never have been a Black Adam. And
that's kind of lame. Why are they just jumping straight to old Superman?
He literally has the same lightning bolt on his chest.
Yeah, and the same wizard that granted him the powers. They just take it from different heroes of different times to where they can draw from their power and essence.
Did Shazam not do so hot at the box office?
No, it was great.
It was great.
It was a successful movie.
Yeah,
it even got good
I've
reviews.
never heard of it.
It was,
and I've not heard The Rock mention Shazam at all.
No,
and it's on purpose though. It's to draw all the attention to Black Adam as a sole character without any respect to the inspiration of the character to begin with. Like, you would think that he would be cheering on the idea of Shazam because it's Shazam's like movie verse that The Rock is being able to be a character in.
Yeah.
But it's weird because I know what he's doing. Of course, he's wanting to draw the attention to the character he's playing to get people to go see the movie to make more money. But as a fan of comics and as a fan of the inspiration behind Black Adam being Shazam, like, it sucks to feel him left out after you just got him on the screen. You just got a successful version of him on the screen.
And his sequel is coming out next year. So it's, and maybe I'll have to just eat my Croc. Maybe I'll have to just put my shoe in my mouth because...
Can I watch?
What if, what if there is that reference in the movie and it is made apparent in the movie?
It may be.
And it's not something talked about because it's going to be something that they're keeping secret. I doubt that would be the case because it doesn't seem like it'd be big enough. But
if they've already revealed that Henry Cavill is returning as Superman, which is like it's been a thing that's been like, is he gonna? Is he not? Is he done? Okay, he hates WB. No, he doesn't. Like, it's been so back and forth and a huge story for just the DC movieverse in general that for him to be announced to be back in the movie is for it to be told that Henry Cavill's an actor in the film, and to not even mention Shazam at all. Like, I don't think that would be a weird way for them to be like, oh, here's the big bomb drop, Shazam's in it. Yeah. The big bomb drop would be the fact that Superman shows up.
Yep.
And the guy that's been Superman recently that people would like for him to continue to be so. Well, not all people, but me people.
No, I'm
people.
The ones that matter. The ones that matter want him to be Superman.
Hey, I matter.
Me.
Hey,
you want him to be Superman too.
He is one of us, and we have to support him. And I'm not talking about Dane. I'm talking about Henry Cavill.
I have an unpopular opinion when it comes to Superman with present company.
So it's rumored that Henry Cavill could join House of the Dragon along with Elizabeth Olsen.
How in the hell is Superman going to be in a George R.R. Martin book / TV show?
Well, look,
I don't care. I just want
we already know he looks good in a white wig,
right?
And like in black armor, so he just looks like he would be such a BA Targaryen.
Yeah, but it's like Geralt already exists.
I know,
and that's
I know.
the thing. Like, it's too close of an IP.
Yeah, and the thing too with Henry Cavill that I think is kind of funny is that he is one of us. He obsesses over Warhammer. He's been on talk shows to where somebody's tried to ask him questions about it, and he starts answering those questions, and then he realizes, oh wait, I'm getting too deep into this. I'm going to dumb it down real quick. And he does the same stuff. He loves D&D.
Well, he can clearly afford Warhammer.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine so. But still, I mean, nonetheless, like, the guy is just a nerd that made it into stardom, and it makes like Papa proud. He's older than I am, but it makes Papa proud.
He'd call you daddy if you wanted him to, I'm sure.
He'd look at my beard and recognize superiority.
He flexes and all you do is like reveal your just magical beard. He's like, you know what? I got nothing. Daddy.
That's called a beard flex.
But the bad part too is, though, after he said that, I might have to fight him off because he might actually think I'm daddy.
Yeah, why? That does kind of bother me too for you, Austin. It bothers me for you that they're skipping right over the established lore of the character.
Oh yeah,
by just like, okay, well, we've got to show the power levels real quick. So who's the most powerful? Superman. All right, he's got to fight Superman. Because we've got The Rock, and he wants to be the most powerful.
Yeah, and he had already changed like an alternate ending for an alternate scene at the end. Which, mind you, DC League of Super Pets was a very good movie, in my opinion.
I haven't seen it yet. I can't wait.
I'm not going to tell you how many times I cried because I don't spoil things as much as possible. But
except that Henry Cavill's going to be in the new Black Adam movie.
I don't spoil things except for the things that I spoil.
Hey, honestly, if you get on the internet, you can't avoid it. Like, even if you're just because you want to know things about it. What I was saying, though, was that the Rock actually had that extra scene made for the end of DC's League of Super Pets where it showed Anubis, which is Black Adam's dog, facing off against Crypto.
Question.
Like trying to steal his toy, like picking fights with each other. And Anubis was also voiced by The Rock.
Question.
Oh, that's funny.
Answer.
What breed was this Anubis?
Doberman?
Okay.
Yep.
That seems
Is that
logical.
okay?
Yeah, Dobies are awesome.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, just a really stern.
And it looks like Anubis.
Yeah, and really,
I'm on board.
Yeah, really stern sitting dog with a giant lightning bolt on his chest. I liked the dog; he looked real cool, but still, he shoved that in there too, just to be like, "Hey, Dwayne Johnson versus Henry Cavill and it's Black Adam, Superman. You do that,
I would also accept Pitbull.
Of course you would. Why wouldn't you?
Mr.
love
Worldwide."
No, the dog breed pit bulls. I love them, and I have one, and she's awesome.
The mention of Henry Cavill and Superman, of course, now my brain is completely consumed by that thought. And a theme apparently we've had this episode is inspiration. And he is somebody who's inspired by the comics playing the character of Superman.
Yes.
Henry Cavill loves Superman comics. He's read so much of them, and even more so just to get into the role of the character, to be on screen, because he wants to do that character justice and have the right inspiration for the character, which
that's
is
awesome.
the source
That's
material.
how it should be.
Exactly. And that's whenever we see like other characters play, like other actors play characters to where it's like, I don't see the inspiration coming through
Idris
of the
Elba
source material.
Looking at you.
Oh, for your gunslinger situation?
Yes, Idris,
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking at you.
And that was a failure to people who understand what the inspiration should be, which is most of the time the source material. It's our issue with Rings of Power right now. Like most of the issue, there are a lot of issues, but that issue is definitely there too. And with The Rock playing Black Adam, my biggest gripe that I've had so far, and I've talked to Austin about this, and he and I think every day we at least have one moment of complaining about Black Adam, even though like we have the movie's not even out yet. But The Rock does not portray an accent for Black Adam's character. And Black Adam, his like whole jam is the fact that he is the protector of his peoples at any cost, which involves murder and being a villain. And he's from
Jamaica?
Kondak.
He's from
close.
Kondak, so close.
It's basically just like a
Egyptian,
fantasy Egyptian country.
Kind of
Right.
like Wakanda.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in Egypt.
Yeah.
But
Also in Africa, both together.
Yeah, there you go.
a continent.
But his like a core part of that character is his like his love of his peoples and his like his origins and where he's from, and Kondak being he is the protector of those people. And there's no like Egyptian, no even spin on The Rock's voice from what I've seen of him as the character. Like he's just Dwayne Johnson talking. It's a core part of that character that makes him so interesting. And even that's not there already, and it's not even out yet. And I want you to eat your Croc. I almost said us to eat your Croc, but I am not getting that anywhere near my face whatsoever.
It kind of has a cheesy smell.
But
Is that what that
I
is?
hate you so. I hate you.
Why is my mouth watering?
I hate you. But his inspiration for the character is missing something that I think should be there. And I think as somebody being the biggest Shazam fan this side of that side, I think you agree with that.
They even write the comic books sometimes in ways to where it's indicative of it being pronounced in a different manner. Mm-hmm. He's saying the same words, but you can see that it's put in a different spelling to where it's sounded out differently when he's pronouncing something. Because he is representing that entire time, that era and that country in which he is all about protecting and representing the most powerful interests of.
Right.
So how to get evil?
Basically, it's just that he is willing to do whatever, regardless of what he's having to step on. Because his problem was, and the reason that they had, so many trials to find the right person to become Shazam was because he was a grown person. He was an adult with preconceived notions, without that innocence left, to where he already saw the world in a certain shade. And with him getting the powers of the Egyptian gods, like Billy Batson says Shazam, same idea. He said Shazam, and Teth Amund turned into Black Adam. So, and that was his, transformation. Once
his command phrase is also Shazam?
Yes, because he got his power from the same wizard.
But he, comics wise, he has to stay in the form of Shazam because he has lived on for generations. How many years?
He at
2,000? I don't know. 200?
It took him 2,000 years to get back from the realm he was banished to by the wizard.
Gotcha.
Once he betrayed the wizard, and he got the mindset, that if I am powered by the gods, if I am fueled, sustained, and kept alive by the power of the gods, am I not a god myself?
Mm-hmm.
So once he adopted that mind frame, he never would transform out of his Black Adam form because it kept him endlessly sustained, which, Shazam's got that same ability. That's why he doesn't have to breathe if he flies through outer space. It's why he can fly underwater without assistance from air. That kind of stuff happens in there, but they exclude a lot of these finite details when they're putting these characters on the screen as well.
Wouldn't that technically be swimming if he's moving through water?
Well, I'm not too sure how that works, and I also can't comprehend
Or does that mean that whales and fishes are flying since they're way above the ground, which the seafloor would be the ground?
They're flying through the water.
What wormhole have you just opened?
I'm not too
Like,
sure.
does a whale get over like the Marianas Trench and look down and go, "Whoa, I'm so high right now"?
It depends on what kind of seaweed they've been eating.
My mind hole is just blown wide open.
But the idea that they would get him to say Shazam is pretty much the way he's defeated in multiple different forms of like comic book and multiple actually just one that I can recall in like an animated form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the animated movie that they came out with. The idea was to have him struck by that lightning bolt and have his powers removed from him, because after your powers are removed, you're returned to your mortal form. His mortal form would have been aged thousands of years in seconds.
Yeah. So he'd be just a decayed corpse, and that's how he's defeated. But he can also come back.
The magic oftentimes brings them back, because DC has a very rich magical universe inside of itself.
Yeah.
There we go. Shout out to Michael Rosenbaum's podcast. Is that what it's called?
No,
that's
called?
Inside of You.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of magic in the DC universe that they don't talk about. They've got, with Constantine, they've got this whole little universe and gang of people. You got Zatanna with the same idea. Dr. Fate's going to be in the Black Adam movie.
Dr. Fate's really cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Pierce Brosnan, I've had multiple conversations with just people and a couple nerds that I really appreciate coming to my trivia nights. But we were talking like Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate is ideal casting.
Yeah, it's perfect.
It's absolutely ideal casting. And Dr. Fate looks incredible as far as the character design goes. That's also magic. There's so much magic in the DC universe. But Shazam was the only taste of the magic of the DC universe that we've seen, aside from whatever little spells that they were doing in either Wonder Woman with the power of the gods, or in Aquaman when they're doing the magic underwater. Like what Mira had.
Like when they're flying under the water with their fishes.
Right.
See.
But that's not even like referred to really as magic within those moments. Because like you said, like Shazam is magic. He's the magical Superman, basically. And Superman is weak to magic. So we're going to get and that's what the angle they're probably going to take with this Black Adam and Superman thing is, yeah, power level wise, Superman is stronger, maybe, but Black Adam has magic, and that's a natural weakness that Superman has that people often forget about.
Are you saying that they're going to pit science against religion? Because that's what I just heard.
Well,
magic
versus science.
Which one would be?
Well, if we were putting them in card types, one would be more of like a faith base, and one would be more of like a science base.
Okay,
because
gotcha.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, a really interesting, and I know we've gotten real hard on this whole Black Adam thing, but it's coming up. It's soon. It's a
next
soon
week.
thing. Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's really soon.
I'm not seeing it until the week after. I won't have the internet for a while, folks. So just keep that in mind.
Something that I thought the Shazam movie did really well was it referenced the fact that Shazam is inspired by Superman, like in their creation, because Superman was even talked about a lot in the movie, and even shows up. Like, it doesn't show Henry Cavill's head because at that point he wasn't a part of all that.
Shows his torso
down, but the thing is, like, Billy's brother, Freddie, his adopted brother, he's obsessed with Superman. He says he's amazing. Like, he just loves Superman, and he wants to train Billy to be a Superman-like character because that's what he sees as a hero. And that movie, it's another reason why that movie is so good, because they reference the inspiration and they do it in a way that it forms the core of that superhero. And that's something that we're missing, at least as of now, for Black Adam, is the inspiration is completely ignored, and it's just The Rock. It's just The Rock as a superhero.
Yeah, it's The Rock in a Black Adam suit, which, mind you, I also think the suit looks really cool.
The suit
looks
awesome.
Suit
looks
really
so cool.
But The Rock looks pretty cool too.
The Rock looks cool. Love The Rock.
It's like, I've seen the trailer. I don't have the love and the knowledge for this Shazam verse that you have, just because my only experiences with Shazam has been the movie, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It was good. It's just, to me, it looks like, capeless Superman punches Jet because he's kind of a dick.
That's really it. Yeah.
That's what we get.
That's going to be the HBO description under it.
A capeless Superman punches a Jet because he's a dick for justice.
I didn't even get the feel of that. Just
yeah, I mean, it has a potential to do many things. It's bringing characters on the screen we've never seen on the big screen. That's also really cool.
Yeah, we could totally eat it. You could totally eat your Croc.
You want to eat my shoe?
No, I hope we're wrong. As many things, like, we were right about Rings of Power. Unfortunately,
Marcus was definitely right. He said he called it off the bat. They're not going to stick to the lore.
Well, I wasn't the only one.
No, you were not, and we were right, and I didn't want to be right.
Hot stinking fecal garbage.
Yes, and I think we were right about House of the Dragon, where we said it's going to have to be great, and people are going to have to get back on track with Game of Thrones just like it never left. That's what's happened.
Honestly.
I don't want to be right about Black Adam, because if it doesn't do well, that is bad for Shazam.
Yeah.
That's going to hurt Shazam in the box office, because everyone's going to relate the two as they're supposed to. And it may be, if it flops, that's not good for Shazam, who had a successful first movie.
Yeah, and his second movie coming out, it could drive people away from going to see it, because if the highest paid actor in Hollywood puts himself into a position that he's passionate about and it makes crickets, that is going to kill the DC universe in one heavy swoop. It's like you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And you've got 4 of the Exodia, the Forbidden One cards in your hand, and you draw that 5th one out and you see it in your hand and you're going to play it, and what if they've got a trap card that takes that and puts it into the graveyard? Your whole plan is screwed, you can't do anything, and then you die the next round. That's what happens.
Well, in the
Can
DC...
you explain that for the idiots that have no idea what a Yugaman is?
That is for the people that know, and they will love it.
Okay.
Only for them. Well, yeah, the DC universe is already a dying thing on its last breath, and the last thing that can happen is a flop, and it's just
time for a reboot, man.
Dude, they can't keep reboot,
but they haven't even.
They have.
Well, here's the thing. This is the reason I feel like I'm going to have to eat my shoe. They're revamping the entirety of the universe of the DC, like the DC extended universe. They're having to revamp the entirety of it, on down to like character portrayals in movies. They're rewriting everything in regards to what happens in Black Adam.
Oh, that's terrible.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I've never seen such a basket of eggs. And it is a hefty basket of eggs.
That's so many eggs
and
in
they're
that
about
one small 2.5 hour basket.
And I don't know, though. They did it with X-Men way back in the day.
They did do it.
Days of Future Past. That's what they did in that movie.
Yeah. Was that successful?
I thought it was very successful.
It was very successful.
I've seen the first X-Men and maybe the second one.
It was. It kind of saved it, and then Apocalypse came out, and I was upset.
Yeah,
but
And then the one after that wasn't very good either.
No,
First Bass or something.
Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
Oh, garbage. Yeah, hot stinky feet.
Oh,
Right. So I mean, they could, but I mean, it seems like because it seems like they're doing this with very little planning.
but
The Rocks had a plan.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, The Rock has had a plan, and
Is he the writer of the movie?
Might as well be.
I think he's probably going to have writer cred.
He may.
I mean, watch him. I'll watch. It'll be a big enough screen. I'll be able to read the end credits, and I'll tell you how many different things he's accredited for. If he's in production, I'll tell you if he's going to be in directorial spots. I'll
Makeup.
What if The Rock is literally standing backstage, like, no, Adam Smasher doesn't look smashy enough. No, we got to redesign this costume. That cost us $1.2 million to make it. That doesn't matter.
It makes my junk look weak.
And then all of a sudden, you just see him twitch and go into a different persona, and he goes from Dwayne Johnson, who's just mad about it, to, how much did you say that suit cost again to make? That cost It doesn't matter!
All I know is it's about drive, it's about power.
Oh, no. Oh, and then he says, can you smell the end of the episode? Thank you all for listening this week on Spotify, iTunes, Good Pods, blah, blah, blah. If there's a rating system, give us 5 of those, of the stars. And then describe why you love us, describe why you hate us. Just give us 5 stars, please. And then there's also links to Redbubble and Teespring within the description of this episode. If you click on those, then you can go buy things and give us money for things in exchange for goods that involve our logo and names and fun stuff on t-shirts. And if you did that, it would make Austin happy, even if he does end up having to eat his Croc.
If you want to tell me what kind of steak sauce to put on my Croc, make sure you tell me on getting on our Instagram, our Facebook, or our Twitter page by looking up @Nerd Grapevine. Or you can donate a little bit to the cause of my hospital bill by getting on Patreon, looking up Nerd Grapevine, and getting a shiny holographic Nerd at the Grapevine sticker and be admired forever by the grapes. I think you can unlock some content on there that's really neat, some Grape Flavored Gaming, and whatever you do, just don't tell people that you think Heinz 57 sauce is going to be the best to pour through the holes of my cheese-smelling Croc, because that might cause them to have a little bit of
Discord.
Yeah, that's the only thing that can be said after that.
The only other
It's awful.
comment I could have made was about your hairy ass thighs, and that would have seemed inappropriate.
Marcus already threw up, so.
Yeah. I just on Discord, there's memes. We're on there. We talk to you. We have good times. We threaten to stream things at you. We stream our games when we have COVID and nobody watches them on there. Not to guilt trip anybody, but you know who you are.
I didn't know.
I wasn't talking about you.
Okay.
good.
But you know who you are. So find us on there. We're live, uncut, uncensored, and irrevocably circumcised.
If it's me, I don't know it's me.
It's not you.
Okay, good.
Okay. Whew.
It's
That
none
was
of it's
close.
none of the 4 of us.
When life gives you grapes, Tiny.
I look at the grapes and I attribute the grapes to another fruit, possibly oranges.
A bunch of oranges?
Yeah, and then I just get to substitute those grapes for oranges.
You're just going to trade in your grapes for oranges?
Yeah, because the oranges were inspired by the grapes.
The oranges are worthless.
Welcome
compared to the grapes.
Nerd it
Well,
through the orange
Look,
tree.
I'm gonna make orange jelly. That's all I'm saying.
That's called marmalade.
When life gives
I'm
you
not
grapes,
making
you're going to make
marmalade.
orange juice? Is that what you just told me?
No.